I am sitting in my Peterbilt cabin on Interstate 75, watching the Alabama sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The engine hums beneath me like an old friend's heartbeat. My grandfather Frank's last words echo in my mind. Sweetheart, real strength shows when everyone turns against you. I never imagined those words would become my reality at last year's will reading. My family abandoned me because I chose to drive trucks, but Grandpa had something special planned that none of us saw coming. Before I share what happened that day, I would love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more real family stories like this. Trust me, what my grandfather did next will completely change how you think about family loyalty. Growing up in the Montgomery family of Mobile, Alabama, meant living with certain expectations. We were not just wealthy, we were old money. My father, Richard Montgomery, built Montgomery Financial Group from the ground up, while my mother, Patricia, dominated the courtroom as one of the city's top attorneys. My older sister, Caroline, followed the family script, perfectly graduating medical school and marrying a successful surgeon. Everyone expected me to fall in line. But I was different from the start. While Caroline played with dolls, I was in the garage with my grandfather, Frank, learning about engines and transmissions. Grandpa Frank was a former Navy mechanic who never lost his love for machinery. He would lift me onto his shoulders so I could see inside the hood of his old Chevy pickup, explaining how every part worked together like a symphony. Abigail, he would say, his weathered hands guiding mine over the engine block. There's poetry in motion and freedom in understanding how things really work. My parents tolerated what they called my tomboy phase. They figured I would outgrow my fascination with motorcycles, muscle cars, and the open road. When I graduated from Southern Methodist University with a business administration degree, they assumed I would join the family company and eventually take over operations. The Montgomery legacy would continue through another generation. Instead, I dropped a bomb at Sunday dinner 3 weeks after graduation. I am enrolling at Birmingham Trucking Institute, I announced, setting down my fork carefully. I want to get my commercial driver's license and start a career in long-haul trucking. The silence stretched like taffy. My father's face turned the color of burgundy wine. You are throwing away everything we built for you to drive a truck like some common laborer? He said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We spent $200,000 on your education so you could have opportunities we never had. I looked around the mahogany dining table at the crystal chandelier, casting rainbow patterns on our fine china, at the oil paintings of Montgomery ancestors watching disapprovingly from gilded frames. Dad, I appreciate everything you have given me, but this is what I want to do. I want to see America. I want to build something with my own hands. I want to be free. My mother set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Freedom. You call living in truck stops and gas stations freedom. What about marriage, children? A stable life? What about your reputation? Caroline shook her head slowly. Abigail, you are being ridiculous. You have every advantage in the world here. Why would you want to throw it all away? Only Grandpa Frank remained quiet during the argument, but I caught him watching me with something that looked like pride in his blue eyes. After dinner, he pulled me aside on the back porch overlooking the garden. You know your own heart, sweetheart, he said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Sometimes the road less traveled is the only one worth taking. 6 months later, I graduated from trucking school with honors and landed a job with Apex Transportation. My first assignment was a coast-to-coast run from Birmingham to Los Angeles, hauling electronics equipment. I remember the moment I climbed into that cab for the first time, feeling the power of 18 wheels beneath me, an endless highway stretching ahead. This was where I belonged. The early days tested every ounce of determination I possessed, learning to back a 53-foot trailer into tight loading docks, managing logbooks and dot regulations, dealing with aggressive drivers who did not expect to see a young woman behind the wheel of a big rig. But I thrived on the challenge. Every successful delivery, every satisfied customer, every mile I covered safely added to my confidence. My family's reaction was swift and cold. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. Dinner invitations dried up completely. When family friends asked about me at social gatherings, my parents would change the subject or offer vague responses about me finding myself. I was becoming an embarrassment to the Montgomery name. The breaking point came at my mother's 60th birthday party 8 months into my trucking career. I had driven straight through from Denver to make it home in time, showering at a truck stop and changing into the nicest dress I owned. The party was held at the country club with the usual crowd of Mobile's social elite, mingling over champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres. Mrs. Pemberton, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in the county, cornered my father near the bar. "Richard, I heard the most interesting thing about Abigail," she said loud enough for nearby guests to overhear. "Someone told me she is driving trucks now. How wonderfully unique." My father's jaw tightened, but he managed a strained smile. "She is going through a phase driving trucks. We are hoping she will come to her senses soon and return to more appropriate work." I had been standing just behind a marble pillar close enough to hear every word. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I stepped into view. "Actually, Mrs. Pemberton, this is not a phase," I said clearly. "This is my career, and I am very proud of what I have accomplished. I have driven over 100,000 miles, safely received 3 safety awards, and my delivery record is spotless." My father's face went pale, then flushed red. "Abigail, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." But I was done hiding. "No, Dad. You just told Mrs. Pemberton that you are hoping I will come to my senses. Well, I have come to my senses. I have found work that challenges me, fulfills me, and allows me to support myself completely. I fail to see how that is shameful." The conversation around us had quieted other guests pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. My father gripped my elbow and steered me toward a quieter corner. "You are embarrassing this family," he hissed under his breath. "We have a reputation to maintain. People talk." I pulled my arm free. "Let them talk. I would rather they talk about me living an authentic life than following someone else's script." I left the party early, driving home alone while my family stayed to smooth over the social awkwardness I had created. For the first time, I understood that my choice was not just disappointing them. It was actively hurting their standing in the community they valued above everything else. Grandpa Frank followed me outside as I walked to my truck. "Do not let them dim your light, sweetheart," he said, pressing a $20 bill into my hand. "Your grandmother used to say that flowers cannot bloom in someone else's shadow. You keep growing toward your own sun." The family pressure intensified over the following months, taking forms I had never experienced before. My mother began calling me twice a week with job opportunities. "Patricia Harris from the law firm has an opening for a legal assistant," she would say. "It pays well and you could learn the business from the ground up. Think about it, Abigail." When gentle persuasion failed, they tried financial pressure. My father closed our joint bank account and canceled the credit cards he had given me for emergencies. "If you insist on supporting yourself," he explained during a tense phone call, "then you need to do it completely. No safety nets." The message was clear: come home and conform or face the world alone. I opened my own checking account at a different bank and applied for my own credit card. For the first time in my life, I was truly financially independent, and despite the fear it brought, there was something liberating about knowing every dollar in my account came from my own work. Caroline took a different approach, arranging blind dates with what she called suitable men. A lawyer from her husband's firm, a young doctor from the hospital, a commercial banker who reminded me painfully of our father. Each dinner was an exercise in explaining why I had chosen trucking over a traditional career path. Most of the men listened politely, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. How do you date someone whose life does not fit into the expected categories? My success in trucking only seemed to make the family more frustrated. Apex Transportation promoted me to lead driver after my first year, putting me in charge of a team of 12 drivers, handling the company's most demanding routes. I used my savings to purchase my own Peterbilt and became an owner-operator, contracting my services while building equity in my equipment. My income exceeded what most college graduates earned in their first 5 years out of school. But financial success meant nothing to a family focused on social standing. At family gatherings, my cousins would share news about promotions, engagements, and new houses in prestigious neighborhoods. When the conversation turned to me, my parents would redirect towards safer topics. I began to feel like a ghost in my own family, present but not acknowledged. The invisibility became official when my cousin Emma announced her engagement. The wedding planning consumed months of family attention with elaborate discussions about venues, catering, and guest lists. I assumed I would receive an invitation like every other family member. Instead, Caroline called me 2 weeks before the ceremony. Emma decided to keep the wedding small and intimate. She explained, her voice carefully neutral. "The venue has space limitations, and with everyone bringing dates, the numbers just did not work out." I knew this was a lie. Emma's wedding had 300 guests, including distant relatives I barely knew, and family friends going back decades. The truth was simpler and more painful. I did not fit the aesthetic they wanted for their photographs. A truck driver cousin would require too much explanation to their social circle. The exclusion stung worse than any argument we had ever had. Arguments meant they still cared enough to fight. Being erased from important family moments meant I had become an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Grandpa Frank called me the night before Emma's wedding. I heard about the invitation situation, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I want you to know that I told them exactly what I thought about their decision. Emma's grandmother would have been ashamed. It's okay, Grandpa, I lied. I have a delivery in Texas anyway. I would not have been able to make it. No, sweetheart, it is not okay. Family means showing up for each other, not just when it is convenient or socially acceptable. You remember that. The Country Club annual gala provided another opportunity for family embarrassment. I decided to attend wearing my best black dress and the pearl necklace Grandpa Frank had given me for graduation. I wanted to prove that I could move in their social circles without causing a scene. The evening started well enough. Several family friends approached me with genuine curiosity about my unusual career choice. Mrs. Henderson from the Garden Club seemed particularly interested in my stories about traveling across the country. What an adventure, she said admiringly. I have always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. But the tone shifted when Mrs. Pemberton's daughter, Sarah, joined our conversation. I heard you are driving trucks now, she said with barely concealed amusement. How interesting. I suppose someone has to do it. Before I could respond, my father appeared at my elbow. Abigail is still figuring things out, he said smoothly, as if I were not standing right there. Young people need time to explore before settling down into serious careers. The patronizing tone ignited something inside me. Actually, I have figured things out very clearly, I said, turning to address the small group that had gathered around us. I own my own truck, I run my own routes, and I have built a business that allows me to travel the country while supporting myself completely. I find it incredibly rewarding work. My father's grip tightened on his whiskey glass. Don't make this worse for us, he whispered urgently, but I was beyond caring about their comfort. For months, I had been an invisible disappointment. Now, I was a visible embarrassment. Neither role felt acceptable anymore. The confrontation exploded that night after we returned home. You are selfish, my father shouted, pacing the length of his study. You think only about yourself and what you want, never considering how your choices affect the people who love you. Love me, I shot back. You cannot love someone and simultaneously be ashamed of them. You cannot claim to care about my happiness while constantly trying to change who I am. My mother tried to play peacemaker. We just want what is best for you, honey. We want you to have security, respect, a life we can all be proud of. Proud of according to whom? I demanded. Your country club friends, your business associates. When did their opinions become more important than your daughter's happiness? The argument raged past midnight, covering old grievances and new resentments. By the time we exhausted ourselves, the fundamental divide remained unchanged. They wanted me to return to their version of success. I needed them to accept my own. Thanksgiving dinner 2 weeks later would prove to be our final confrontation as an intact family. Extended family gathered at our house as they had every year since I was a child. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the dining room, sharing updates about children, careers, and travel plans. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, had always enjoyed playing the family comedian. Halfway through dinner, he raised his wine glass and grinned at the assembled group. I would like to propose a toast, he announced, to the Montgomery family tradition of excellence, and to our very own blue collar, Rebel Abigail, who keeps us humble by reminding us that someone has to drive the trucks that deliver our fancy food. Nervous laughter rippled around the table. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation, but I tried to keep my voice steady. Actually, Uncle Robert Trucking requires significant skill and responsibility. We move 70% of America's freight, and we do it safely despite dealing with traffic, weather, and tight delivery schedules. It is not unskilled labor. Aunt Susan Roberts' wife jumped into the conversation with the kind of smile that barely concealed her disdain. Of course, dear, we are all very impressed by your independence. It is just such a waste of your good education. All that potential, and you choose manual labor. The condescension in her voice snapped something inside me. There is nothing shameful about physical work, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. There is nothing shameful about choosing a career based on personal fulfillment rather than social expectations. And there is certainly nothing shameful about being financially independent at 28 years old. My father slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the wine glasses. Enough, he roared. "You have embarrassed us enough with your selfishness and your stubborn pride. Either you quit this nonsense and come back to the family business or do not come back to this house at all." Silence fell over the dining room like a heavy blanket. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting to see how I would respond to the ultimatum. My grandmother's china seemed to gleam more brightly in the chandelier light, as if even the family heirlooms were holding their breath. I looked around the table at faces I had known and loved my entire life. These people had cheered at my school plays, celebrated my graduation, and attended my birthday parties. Now they sat in judgment, waiting for me to choose between my authentic self and their approval. "I choose myself," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "I choose the life that makes me happy, even if it disappoints all of you." I walked out of that dining room and did not look back. Only Grandpa Frank followed me to the front door, his weathered hand gentle on my shoulder. "This is not over, sweetheart," he said, pressing his house key into my palm. "Sometimes families need time to find their way back to what really matters." 2 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, Grandpa Frank suffered a massive heart attack while working in his garden. I was in Nevada halfway through a delivery to Reno when Caroline called with the news. I drove straight through, pushing legal hour limits and stopping only for fuel, desperate to reach the hospital in time. But I arrived 20 minutes too late. Grandpa Frank had died surrounded by family, but I was not there to hold his hand or tell him goodbye. The guilt crushed me like physical weight. The one person who had truly understood and supported me was gone, and I had been hundreds of miles away living the life he had encouraged me to build. The funeral service reflected everything Grandpa Frank had been: simple, honest, and full of genuine emotion. The Methodist Church overflowed with mechanics, veterans, and neighbors whose lives he had touched through small acts of kindness. My family sat in the front pew, their grief real despite their complicated relationship with his unconventional values. I sat in the back, feeling like an intruder in my own grandfather's memorial service. During the reception afterward, relatives offered polite condolences, but the warmth that had once existed between us had frozen solid. I was family by blood, but a stranger by choice, present for grief, but excluded from comfort. 3 days later, the family gathered at Montgomery Estate for the reading of Grandpa Frank's will. His attorney, Mr. Jameson, had served the family for 30 years and knew everyone's history. The main house felt cavernous, with 30 family members assembled in the formal living room, sitting on antique furniture that had been in the family for 4 generations. Mr. Jameson cleared his throat and began reading the standard legal language that opened the document. Most of the smaller bequests were predictable: his fishing equipment to various grandsons, his tool set to Uncle Robert, his collection of Navy memorabilia to the local veterans organization. But then came the surprise that changed everything. To my beloved granddaughter, Abigail Montgomery, Mr. Jameson read, his voice steady despite the tension building in the room. "I leave the Montgomery Ranch property consisting of 2,000 acres, the main house and all outbuildings. I also bequeath my complete vintage automobile collection, my shares in Montgomery Financial Group, and my investment portfolio, valued at approximately $4.2 million. Gasps echoed around the room. My father's face went white, then red, then white again. This was not just a generous inheritance. This was the bulk of Grandpa Frank's estate, worth more than what some family members would inherit from their own parents. But Mr. Jameson was not finished. "However," he continued, "these bequests are contingent upon one condition. The inheritance will only transfer if the Montgomery family remains united and supportive of each other. Should any family member be formally ostracized or disowned for pursuing their chosen career or lifestyle, the entire inheritance will be donated to the American Cancer Society instead." The room erupted in whispered conversations. Uncle Robert leaned forward in his chair, his face flushed with confusion and anger. "What exactly does that mean? Ostracized how?" Mr. Jameson adjusted his glasses and continued reading. "The will defines ostracism as any formal family vote or declaration, excluding a member from family gatherings, inheritance, or support based on their career choices or personal lifestyle decisions." My father stood up abruptly, his lawyer instincts taking over. "This is highly unusual. Frank never mentioned any such conditions when we discussed his estate planning. How can we be sure this document is legitimate?" "I can assure you the document is completely legal and binding," Mr. Jameson replied calmly. "Mr. Montgomery updated his will 6 months ago after considerable deliberation. He wanted to ensure his legacy would promote family unity rather than division. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. Grandpa Frank had not just left me money. He had created a situation where the family could only access their inheritance by accepting me. It was brilliant, protective, and completely unexpected. Caroline raised her hand tentatively. What happens if we simply continue as we are? No formal votes or declarations, just the current situation. Mr. Jameson shuffled through his papers and pulled out another document. Actually, there is more. Mr. Montgomery was quite thorough in his planning. This addendum addresses exactly that scenario. He began reading again, and with each word I felt the ground shifting beneath the entire family structure. In the event that the family has already taken steps to exclude any member prior to this will reading, they have one opportunity to formally reverse those actions. However, if they choose instead to make their exclusion official through any kind of formal vote or declaration, the inheritance immediately transfers according to the alternative distribution plan. Uncle Robert was on his feet now, his face red with indignation. This is blackmail. Frank is trying to control us from beyond the grave. Frank is trying to protect family unity, Mr. Jameson corrected. He was quite explicit about his concerns regarding how certain family members had been treated. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Everyone knew who the certain family members referred to. Everyone understood that my career choice had created the exact situation Grandpa Frank had feared. Aunt Susan spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. So, if we vote to officially exclude Abigail unless she gives up trucking, she gets everything and we get nothing. That is correct, Mr. Jameson confirmed. My father began pacing the length of the room, his mind clearly racing through legal and financial calculations. $4.2 million was not money the family could afford to lose, especially with several cousins approaching college age and Uncle Robert facing some business difficulties. But the money also represented something deeper: power, control. The ability to force the family to confront their treatment of me instead of simply pretending the problem did not exist. I propose we take a break, my father announced. This is a lot to process, and we need time to discuss our options privately. But Uncle Robert was not ready to let the moment pass. He stood up and faced the assembled family, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult business decisions. No, he said firmly. We need to address this head on. Frank has put us in an impossible position, but maybe that was his point. Maybe he wanted us to finally be honest about what we really value. He turned to look directly at me. Abigail, you have chosen a career that embarrasses this family. You have rejected everything we stand for and everything we have built. Now your grandfather is trying to force us to accept choices that go against our core values. My heart began pounding as I realized where this was heading. The family was not going to quietly accept Grandpa Frank's conditions. They were going to force the issue by making their rejection of me official. I propose we vote, Uncle Robert continued. Not because of the money, but because Frank's will forces us to take a stand one way or the other. We cannot live in limbo anymore. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each family member. I move that we formally ask Abigail to choose abandon her trucking career and return to work appropriate for a Montgomery, or be formally excluded from family gatherings, inheritance, and support. All in favor of giving Abigail this ultimatum, raise your hands. The silence that followed Uncle Robert's motion felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see who would move first. I watched my father's face, hoping against hope that he would speak up for me, that he would choose love over money and social standing. Instead, his hand rose slowly into the air. Dad! I whispered the word, escaping before I could stop it, but he would not meet my eyes. His hand remained raised, steady and resolute, as he made his choice clear to everyone in the room. One by one, other hands began to rise. My mother was next, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her hand up nonetheless. Caroline hesitated for nearly a full minute, looking back and forth between me and our parents, before finally reluctantly raising her hand as well. Uncle Robert counted aloud as the votes accumulated. Robert Montgomery, yes. Susan Montgomery, yes. David Montgomery, yes. My cousins Emma, Michael, and James all raised their hands, avoiding eye contact with me as they voted for my exile. The counting continued with horrible precision. Extended family members who had attended my birthday parties, graduation celebrations, and holiday dinners now sat in judgment of my life choices. Aunt Patricia, Uncle William's wife raised her hand with a defiant expression, as if daring me to challenge her right to vote. Cousin Rebecca hesitated but ultimately joined the majority. 26, 27, 28. Uncle Robert announced, his voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. I looked around the room, frantically searching for allies. Old Aunt Margaret, my great-aunt, who was nearly 90 years old, kept her hands firmly in her lap. Uncle William, Grandpa Frank's brother, and the closest thing to him in temperament, also refused to participate in the vote. 28 out of 30 family members, Uncle Robert declared. The motion passes overwhelmingly. Abigail, you have 1 week to decide. Quit trucking and come home to appropriate work, or accept that you are no longer welcome in this family. The finality of his words hit me like a physical blow. 28 people I had loved my entire life had just voted to exile me unless I abandoned the career that brought me joy and fulfillment. They had chosen their social standing over their relationship with me. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling with the effort. "You are asking me to give up who I am?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother leaned forward, her face streaked with tears. "We are asking you to come back to who you were meant to be, to the daughter we raised and loved." "You love the daughter you wanted me to be," I replied, finding strength in my anger. "You cannot love the daughter I actually am." I looked around the room one final time at faces that had been the foundation of my world since childhood. These people had taught me to walk, helped with homework, celebrated my achievements, and comforted my disappointments. Now they sat in judgment, unified in their rejection of my authentic self. 28 out of 30. I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. I will remember that for the rest of my life. Just as I felt my composure beginning to crack completely, Mr. Jameson cleared his throat again. The sound cut through the emotional tension like a knife, drawing every eye back to the front of the room. "Actually," he said, reaching into his briefcase and withdrawing another document, "there is something else. Something I was instructed to reveal only if this exact scenario occurred." He unfolded the papers with deliberate care, his expression grave. "Mr. Frank Montgomery left very specific instructions regarding what should happen if the family voted to exclude any member for following their dreams." My father's voice was sharp with suspicion. "What kind of instructions?" Mr. Jameson began, reading from the new document. Quote, "If my family chooses money over love, control over acceptance, and social standing over supporting each other's authentic selves, then I want my legacy to reflect different values entirely. If Abigail Montgomery is formally voted out of the family for pursuing her chosen career, she will inherit my entire estate. All other bequests are hereby revoked." End quote. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the antique clock on the mantelpiece ticking, the sound of someone's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats. "That cannot be legal," Uncle Robert sputtered, his face turning red with outrage. "It is completely legal and ironclad," Mr. Jameson replied calmly. "Mr. Montgomery spent considerable time with me ensuring this document would withstand any legal challenge. He anticipated exactly this scenario." My cousin David jumped to his feet. "Wait, we can change our votes! We can take it back!" Mr. Jameson shook his head. "The vote has been recorded and witnessed. According to Mr. Montgomery's instructions, the family has revealed their true priorities. The alternative distribution is now in effect." I felt the room spinning around me as the magnitude of what had just happened settled in. Grandpa Frank had not just protected me. He had turned the family's rejection into my ultimate vindication. They had voted to exclude me for following my dreams, and in doing so, they had given me the power to determine their financial futures. Uncle Robert was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. "This is insane. Frank has destroyed this family over a stubborn girl who wants to play with trucks." "Frank has not destroyed anything," I said, finding my voice at last. "You destroyed it the moment you voted to choose money over accepting your own family member." I stood up, feeling more powerful than I had ever felt in my life. For months, I had been the problem, the disappointment, the source of family shame. Now I was the solution, the inheritor, the one with control over their futures. But even as the power coursed through me, I felt something else: profound sadness. This was not how I had wanted to win. I had wanted acceptance, love, and support. Instead, I had received validation through their greed and a grandfather's posthumous protection. "You all voted based on money." I said, looking around the room at their stunned, angry, desperate faces. Grandpa Frank knew that about you, and he planned accordingly. That tells me everything I need to know about what our relationships were really based on. I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final statement. I will accept grandfather's gift, but not out of spite or revenge. I will use this inheritance to build something positive. Montgomery Logistics will expand to provide opportunities for other women who want careers in trucking. I will prove that following your passion is not shameful, it is powerful. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the family that had raised me and rejected me in the same room. Family dinners will be held every Sunday at the ranch house as Grandpa Frank always wanted. Anyone who truly wants to accept me as I am will always be welcome. Anyone who still believes I should change to meet your expectations can stay away. I walked out of that house and climbed into my Peterbilt, leaving behind the chaos of their anger and disbelief. As I drove away from Montgomery Estate for what I knew would be the last time as a disinherited family member, I felt something I had not experienced in months: peace. Grandpa Frank had been right about everything. Real strength shows when everyone turns against you. Love is not about controlling someone into the shape you want them to take. And sometimes the people who truly love you are the ones who protect you even after they are gone. Here I am now, a year later, sitting in my truck cab, watching another Alabama sunset. Montgomery Logistics employs 50 drivers, 42 of them women, who were told they could not or should not pursue careers in trucking. We have the best safety record in the Southeast and a client list that includes some of the biggest manufacturers in the country. Some family members have come around. Caroline calls me every few weeks, and we are slowly rebuilding our relationship. She admits now that she voted out of fear rather than conviction. My mother sends letters, occasionally tentative attempts to bridge the gap her choice created. My father has not spoken to me since that day, but I heard through Caroline that he tells people his daughter owns a successful logistics company. He cannot quite bring himself to say trucking company, but it is progress. Uncle William comes to Sunday dinners at the ranch house sometimes. He tells stories about Grandpa Frank and shares memories that help me understand how deeply my grandfather loved me. Aunt Margaret, despite her age, has become an unexpected ally, often saying what others are thinking, but do not have the courage to express. The ranch has become a gathering place for chosen family, as well as blood family. My drivers and their families join us for holidays and celebrations. We have created the kind of inclusive, accepting community that Grandpa Frank always envisioned. But the most important thing I learned from this whole experience is that real family support is not about changing yourself to fit other people's expectations. It is about finding the courage to be authentic and surrounding yourself with people who celebrate that authenticity. Grandpa Frank showed me that love can transcend death, that wisdom can be passed down through carefully planned protection, and that sometimes the best inheritance is not money, but the courage to be yourself no matter who is watching. The sun has set completely now, and I need to get back on the road. I have a delivery in Memphis tomorrow morning, and then I will head home to the ranch where family dinners happen every Sunday, where everyone is welcome as long as they come with acceptance in their hearts. And sometimes, when the highway stretches out straight and endless in front of me, I swear I can hear Grandpa Frank's voice on the wind telling me to keep growing toward my own son. What would you have done if your family asked you to choose between your dreams and their approval? Have you ever had to stand up for who you really are, even when everyone you loved was asking you to be someone else? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family stories that remind us what love and acceptance really mean. And do not forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to be authentic, even when it is difficult. Thank you for watching, and remember that the road to being yourself is always worth traveling, no matter how lonely it sometimes feels.